everybody. Welcome to the new week. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton's behind the camera. Whole new week ahead of us. And it's going to be an eventful one. It's a heck of a lot to cover, I think, today, but we've got the whole week to do it. We produce a different broadcast, one for Facebook, and the same one goes out as a podcast. So if you haven't ever seen this, you might be able to, or it might be better for you just to listen to it as a podcast, and you get the Court of Public Opinion, Jeremy Cordeaux's Court of Public Opinion, wherever you get your favourite podcasts. Happy birthday if you're having a birthday. March the 13th. 1923 was the year. American inventor Lee DeForest. He demonstrates his sound on film moving pictures in New York City on this day. The beginning of the talkies. Brilliant. 1923. Golly. 1877, American Chester Greenwood patents earmuffs. He was 15 years old. Earmuffs. Yeah, well, that's practical, isn't it? I think earmuffs would be a practical thing. In 1943, Nazis liquidate the Jewish ghetto of Krakow. Oskar Schindler, with some advance information, saves his workers by keeping them in his factory overnight. And thus began that incredible story, Schindler's List. Where are we? 1639, Cambridge College in Massachusetts is renamed Harvard. Renamed Harvard after a clergyman by the name of John Harvard. And that's all the information I've got on that. William Hurt, the American Academy Award-winning actor. Big Chill, Children of a Lesser God. Kiss of the Spider Woman. Broadcast news. He dies of prostate cancer at just 71. 2022 was the year. J.L. Johnston of England invents horse racing starting gates. I don't know how they started horse. What was the year? 1894. I guess they must have just had a piece of rope or something strung across the course. British guitarist Eric Clapton quits the Yardbirds due to the band having moved away from what he described as traditional blues. Jeff Beck becomes his replacement. Jeff Beck, Hi-Ho Silver Lining. You remember that? Pete, do you remember that? Hi-Ho Silver Lining, 67 I think it would have been. Anyway, that occurred, let me tell you, in 1965. The Australian Catholic Cardinal George Pell is sentenced to 6 years in jail for the sexual abuse in Australia, conviction overturned in 2020, but that was in 2019. General Motors reports on this day in 1950 net earnings of, golly, $656,434,232. It was a bumper year. That's a lot of cars. Wow. 1950. Tennessee makes it unlawful to teach anything about the evolution. That was in 1925. Australian federal elections. The Australian Labor Party, headed up by Paul Keating, re-elected for a 5th term, beats Liberal leader John Howard on this day in 1993. And Lee Falk, who always seemed to turn up in his own movies, or when they made movies about his comic book heroes. Lee Falk, the American comic strip writer, the Phantom, most famously, I suppose. He dies at 97. 1999 was the year. And happy birthday to you if you're having a birthday or it's your wedding anniversary. I've got something else here which Louise sent to me as tribute to International Women's Day. I don't know whether we should do it, Louise.
Yes, we should.
We should. Okay. All right. As an aeroplane is about to crash, a female passenger jumps up frantically and announces, "If I'm going to die, I want to die feeling like a woman." She removes all her clothes and asks, "Is there someone on this plane who is man enough to make me feel like a woman?" A man slowly stands up in about the middle of the plane, removes his shirt and says, "Here, iron this." Louise, you're twisted and you'll get me into trouble as well. Here's a fun fact. It was 1987 when CDs first outsold vinyl records. That was for the first time. 1987. I'm happy to tell you, as an old romantic, it was announced on Friday that for the first time since, 1987, vinyl is outselling CDs. I don't know, what does that tell you? Pete, you're into music and records and things. What does that tell you?
It tells me I've got 1,500 CDs.
Oh, yeah, but it also tells me that, when I go into Scammell's and I see record players, not even necessarily old-time record players, but just record players out of the 60s, 70s and 80s, selling for $5. I guess they're going to be $105 soon. I don't know if anyone still makes record players and turntables and pickups and stylus and things like that. I don't know. The world's oldest woman has died at the age of 128. That's amazing, 128. Just after saying, she died right after saying, "What's the point of being alive? I just sit here doing nothing." There are people who are 25 years old who have asked the same question. In their case, it is sad, but not in mine. And then she died. And it's all ridgy-dig, her age, I mean. It's been documented. She was born on the 11th of May in 1894, one of 12 children, never went to school, could not read or write. Wow. She had 7 children and 50 grandchildren, survived World War I, World War II, the Wright brothers' first flight, and the Russian Revolution. Wow. Wow, wow. Just to think of it is amazing. I don't know whether it was a stunt or not, but in the county court in Victoria the other day, you would have heard about this. A woman carrying a baby enters the courtroom, sits in the corner, and proceeds to breastfeed her baby. The judge stops the hearing and asks her to leave. Now, I personally think it's a storm in a teacup, but great controversy. Lots of interviews about breastfeeding, the Breastfeeding Association of Australia, then they would get in the Bar Association of Victoria. All I can think of is it must have been a fairly quiet news day. But seriously, I don't know what you think. I'd like to know what you think. When we get hooked up to a telephone, you'll be able to tell me. But the judge is entitled to do what he likes in his own court. I think they've got total discrimination, haven't they? Every right to discriminate if he wants to. If he thinks the woman is a distraction or pulling a stunt, he's got every right to ask her to leave. I remember a couple of cases where women have started breastfeeding their babies in Parliament and they've been asked to leave. Breastfeeding is pretty much accepted absolutely everywhere, of course. But while breasts are a wonderful force of nature and an endless source of male fascination, society is somewhat obsessed with them, you might have noticed. It shouldn't be the case, of course, but it is. The truth is that they are female breasts very much a part of human sexuality. So you can forget the sustenance and nourishment bit. But I must say, if you want to come, young lady, with your baby into my court, the court of public opinion, and feed your baby here, you're more than welcome. More than welcome. Now tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to know more, although maybe we won't. Maybe we won't. But they're saying, hold out till Tuesday. It seems we have done a deal on the submarines, of particular interest and importance to Adelaide, of course. Under this AUKUS agreement, we will buy 3 or 4 or 5 subs from the United States as a stopgap. It's all a bit vague. New or second-hand. I mean, are we buying them or borrowing them? What about the cost? A bit open-ended. The US have several submarines that they make. There is the Los Angeles, Seawolf, and Virginia class submarines. So I don't really know. I think people are jumping to the conclusion that it'll be the Virginia class submarine. They've all got different attributes. Now, we may be involved in the production, we may be involved in the training, maybe they just haven't quite made up their mind yet. Production here in Adelaide might not begin until, there are a lot of mites in here, might not begin until 2040s. For God's sake, why did we agree to all of this, which is, as I say, vague, but perhaps more meat on the bones come tomorrow? My problem with submarines is, I know we have got an enormous coastline to protect, I understand that, but of the present 6 Collins-class submarines, there is only 1 that is operational, and for one reason, and that is we don't have enough people to crew them. I don't think that gets a lot of publicity. We had the same problem with the Oberon-class subs, as you might remember. I don't know why, but we just seem to have not a lot of people who want to sign up to be submariners. We really should think about that before we sign up to the kind of multi-billion-dollar expenditure that they're talking about. It's not a deal breaker, but it's certainly worth considering. Just making the whole thing a little bit more clear. And again, to point out, as I have a few times, that the wars of the future will probably be fought on a computer. They're going to be cyber wars, aren't they? Remote control, basically run by artificial intelligence, and the destruction of a country will be quite remote. Anyway, we've got to be careful, because if these things aren't going to be delivered until God knows when, over what period of time, the obsolescence factor has got to be taken into consideration. Coming up at the end of the month, South Australia is going to try and pass a law for a local Aboriginal voice to state parliament. Now, I can't tell you how much against this kind of apartheid I am. I really am. It's apartheid, and we shouldn't have any part of that in South Australia or Australia. Generally, there is one democratic rule for all Australians. Aboriginals, white people, whatever. Immigrants, all sorts of different people will have a different point of view, and points of view will differ from time to time. But everyone has the same democratic right that we all have. That's the ability to join a party, stand for a party, maybe start a party. I don't know. We can do precisely what we like under the present arrangements. With this local voice, Labor is not only trying to reinvent the wheel, but it seems that it is a racist system that they want to superimpose on our existing system, where people are treated differently simply because of the colour of their skin. And as for recognition of Aboriginals in the Constitution, I pointed out to you, it's already there. But, without restating the obvious, most people have never seen the Constitution, let alone read it. But section 51(26) states quite clearly that the Parliament is able to make special arrangements or laws for Aboriginal people. I don't know what exactly they want. I'll read you this. Now, this, in all honesty, was not sent to me. It was, in fact, sent to Pete. It's okay if I read your mail, Pete?
Yes.
This is the work of, or the words of Jacinta Price, the politician. And she says here, "Dear Peter, here's a simple truth, one that every Australian knows in his or her heart. If we want to make a difference in the lives of our most marginalised, we have to begin by putting a stop to treating Aboriginal Australians differently." This is what I wrote in the Australian over the weekend. This would have been, what weekend, last weekend?
Yes, I think so, yes.
I didn't get the Australian. I'd like to read her whole article. This is what I wrote in the Australian on the weekend, and the response from Aussies has been overwhelming. The message is loud and clear to anyone who wants to listen. You and I do not want a nation where one group of people is constitutionally separated from the rest of society based on the colour of their skin. Jacinta, absolutely right. Absolutely right. It hasn't worked out so far, has it? She writes. For decades, governments and activists have treated Indigenous Australians as though we are hopelessly broken and less than everyone else. Billions of dollars of investment has been wasted on the ideological premise that Aboriginal Australians have disadvantage written into their racial heritage. And now they want to overhaul our Constitution to enshrine that broken system in the heart of our democracy forever. It's just constitutionally enshrining division and defeat. Have a look at the activists and the politicians campaigning loudest for this divisive voice. Those same people who are now arguing that Aboriginals are. Not only that, taxpayers have poured billions of dollars into their failed ideas. In fact, 4 very senior Aboriginal politicians, I will mention the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Linda Burney, Labor Senators McCarthy and Patrick Dodson, have more than 65 years of collective experience within the state, territory and federal parliaments. And now they want their failure actually written into the Constitution. No way, says Jacinta Price. The truth is that these loud, powerful voices are all the evidence you need that any human who can gain an education can take advantage of what our nation has to offer. Despite what they tell you, success has little to do with race. It has everything to do with treating Aboriginal people no differently to anyone else. Constitutionally enshrining the very voices that have perpetuated the ideological notion that Aboriginal Australians are inherently disadvantaged is constitutionally enshrining failure. Yours sincerely, and in unity, Jacinta Price, Australian Parliament. It's a very good letter, Pete.
She's Aboriginal.
She is Aboriginal. Very, very good letter. You should keep that. I'll get a copy of it because I think people might want to have another look at that. But if she has written like that in the Australian, the Weekend Australian, of going back 2 weekends, it'd be worthwhile getting a back issue, I would think. So when that referendum comes up, we will be able to vote with enough knowledge in our heads and our hearts to do the right thing. Thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton will be with us, and I hope you will be too. Believe in yourself, and goodbye for now.